Chapter 4, Interviewing and Report Writing. Page 97, Unit 1, Interviewing. Lesson 1, Questions and Interviews. Lesson Goal. At the end of this lesson, you will understand the importance of asking questions, interviewing, and obtaining statements. Think about this. An officer hears raised voices from a cell. They go to investigate and see that the toilet is overflowing. After the officer gets help and fixes the issue, they have to talk to both inmates to gather information about the incident. What are the officer's next steps? Conducting interviews and asking the right questions are vital skills in the correctional officer profession. Officers must be able to communicate not only with inmates, but also with non-sworn personnel and the wider public. Throughout the course of a day, any number of incidents may occur that require an officer to ask the right questions, conduct an effective interview, and obtain a statement if required. Asking questions. The primary responsibilities of a correctional officer include maintaining the safety of inmates and staff, as well as ensuring facility security. As such, it is important for you to be informed and aware of what is happening in the facility and with the inmates in order to identify potential safety and security concerns. Asking questions is the most effective way to gather important information. Throughout the course of your daily duties, you will obtain information through both informal and formal interactions with staff, visitors, and inmates. The most vital information will often come from informal communication with inmates. Informal communication, in this sense, refers to conversations that are not related to any specific incident or event, but rather address the daily lives of the inmates. Building rapport with inmates can make it easier to obtain information from them. Informal conversations between inmates and officers can help establish rapport and allow officers to understand the people they supervise better. However, it is essential to maintain professional boundaries when interacting with inmates. Here are some ways to build rapport with inmates. Be professional. Act and look like a professional whose duty is to provide care, custody, and control of the inmates you supervise. Be respectful. Speak and act fairly, firmly, and consistently with everyone. Be truthful. Be honest with the inmates about what you can and cannot do. Be a good listener. Use active listening whenever you interact with inmates to ensure effective communication. Remember the following: the importance of building rapport with inmates and the importance of asking questions to gather information. By communicating respectfully and establishing rapport with inmates, you set the example for what good communication looks like and the expectations for how someone should be spoken to. You also send the message that it is okay to share information, which ultimately allows for more open communication to occur. As you start to gather information from your daily interactions, you will learn what is considered normal for your environment, such as noise level, smell, and inmate behaviors, which will help you recognize when something unusual occurs. You will learn more about recognizing what is normal and what is not normal in your facility in Chapters 5 and 7. When something out of the norm occurs and you are the responding officer, you may need to ask questions to establish what happened so that you and the proper authorities can make a decision on how to proceed. This can be accomplished through the process of interviewing. Interviewing. An interview is a conversation between a person asking questions, the interviewer, and a person answering questions, the interviewee, with the goal of obtaining factual information. An interviewee does not have to be a suspect. They could be a victim, witness, or someone with relevant knowledge. An interview may use informal questions or formal questions. Informal interviews can take the form of informal or observational questions, and they are not as structured as formal interviews. Correctional officers often conduct informal interviews with inmates or visitors without realizing it, and during an interview, policy violations, rule infractions, or other issues may come to light. While some interviews are simply part of your observations, others might result in the need for documentation or a report. When gathering information, be sure to take notes to help with report writing and documentation. Keep in mind that your notes might be used as evidence if an investigation is conducted. After collecting information, follow your agency's policies and procedures on how to proceed. If it is determined that an incident in a correctional facility is criminal in nature, formal interviews or interrogations may be necessary for investigation. An interrogation is the formal questioning of a suspect by law enforcement or investigators with the intent to get a suspect to confess to a crime. As a correctional officer, you will not conduct interrogations or formal interviews. A facility investigator or law enforcement officer will conduct interrogations. In a correctional facility, formal interviews will be conducted by different specialists depending on the incident. In the case of a criminal incident, the agency's investigative unit or other law enforcement will conduct formal investigations. Agencies may also have STG coordinators or specialists who will conduct STG-related interviews and investigations. PREA coordinators will conduct interviews whenever any sexual assault or other PREA-related incident is reported. Consider the following. Explain the purpose of an interview and explain when formal interviewing may be required. Miranda considerations. As discussed in Chapter 2, inmates must be read their Miranda rights prior to being interrogated under custody in a criminal investigation. Although you will not issue a Miranda warning, you will need to know who is required by law to administer Miranda warnings to inmates. Dual sworn officers and investigators in certain agencies might be given the power to read Miranda rights to inmates. Be sure to follow your agency's policies and procedures. Obtaining a statement. After an incident occurs, or after conducting an initial interview, it may be necessary to obtain statements from all individuals involved. A statement is a permanent oral or written record that may or may not be made under oath of a person's account of an incident or occurrence. Statements may be taken as part of the disciplinary process and for certain non-criminal incidents. A written statement is the preferred method of obtaining a statement from an interviewee. For criminal incidents, statements will be obtained by facility investigators or law enforcement officers. When you ask an interviewee to provide a written statement, explain the reason, and be clear about what information should be included. When a person writes a statement, ask them to write clearly and have them describe the incident to the best of their recollection. They should describe the incident, including the date, time, place, people, possible weapons involved, and any other details of the event. Read the statement and compare its content with your notes from the interview. If an interviewee says something important during an interview but leaves it out of the written statement, ask them to include the missing information. Clarify any information that you cannot read or do not understand. An interviewee who is non-English speaking may write a statement in their preferred language. When this happens, one option is to have a correctional officer who is fluent in that language review the statement. If an interpreter is used, the interpreter should state exactly what the interviewee said. Always refer to your agency's policies and procedures regarding the use of translators. If the interviewee does not read or write or has any other limitation, follow your agency's policies on how to prepare written statements. There are some guidelines that you may consider. You may ask questions, or have the interviewee relay the information in their own words while you write the statement. But do not paraphrase or summarize the statements from an interviewee. Each agency has its own format and procedure for obtaining statements, so you need to use your agency's specific format. In some situations, an interviewee may be injured, sick, or incapacitated and unable to sign a statement. When this happens, write the reason why the person was unable to sign the statement. If an interviewee refuses to sign their statement, note "refused to sign" at the bottom of the statement. Under certain circumstances, it may be impossible to take a statement. Always document why a person did not or could not provide a statement. For example, an inmate who is injured and requires immediate medical attention is often unable to give or sign an immediate statement. If, for any reason, you are unable to obtain a statement, record this information in your notes and written report. Remember to identify when and how to obtain a written statement. When an interviewee submits a written statement, you must verify that it is complete and able to be read before they sign the document. If you prepare the statement on the interviewee's behalf, read the statement back to the interviewee, make any necessary corrections, and ask the interviewee to sign and date the statement or leave a thumbprint. Interviewees sign statements to prove that the words are their own. A witnessing officer should also sign the statement. After this is done, you will sign the statement as well. Before submitting a statement, review it to ensure it is accurate, concise, and related to the incident. Page 101, Unit 1 Interviewing, Lesson 2, Taking Good Notes. Lesson goal: at the end of this lesson, you will understand the importance of note-taking and know strategies for taking good notes. Think about this. You break up a fight between 3 inmates and interview them for a report. When reviewing your notes, you realize that you forgot to record the time when the fight occurred, and you are struggling to understand some of your notes. What issues will you have when writing an accurate report? Before you begin writing a report, you need to gather the information related to the incident or event. This process may require interviewing the people involved or collecting background details and facts that set the context for the incident. While gathering information, you must practice good note-taking, which is the act of writing down brief observations or notes. Notes are the details that you record about an event, interview, or people involved. In the case of an interview, you may also include direct quotes from the people involved. Direct quotes are a person's exact words as they state them. The information you gather while taking notes will help you remember key facts to include in your report or documentation, and it may also aid in further investigation. Therefore, it is crucial that you take accurate notes to ensure that you have reliable information. In some cases, your notes may be used as evidence in court. What to record in notes? When responding to an incident, you must gather preliminary details from the people involved, such as the victim, witness, or suspect. Your notes should, at minimum, answer the questions of who, what, when, where, why, and how an incident occurred, as well as any actions and follow-up actions that were taken. Types of critical information to record in your notes include who, names of people involved, such as victims, witnesses, and suspects. What, details of the incident, such as illnesses, injuries, and behavioral descriptions of people involved. When, date and time that the incident occurred, or a timeline of events. Where, location of the incident. Why, reasons for or causes of the incident. How, means by which the incident occurred. Actions taken, steps taken to resolve the incident, such as disposition, confinement, medical treatment, or verbal reprimand. Follow-up administrative actions taken. Consider the following. Explain the purpose of note-taking. Identify the details of an incident and the basic questions that notes should address. List the types of critical information to record during note-taking. Strategies for note-taking. It is important to take notes throughout the process of collecting information. Sometimes circumstances may delay immediate note-taking, but the longer it takes you to write down what you see and hear, the greater the chances are that you will forget some of the information. Notes taken in the field are intended to help refresh your memory as you complete reports. For this reason, you do not need to write everything word for word, but you should capture key points, facts, and details. Follow these important note-taking strategies to ensure that you take good notes. Use a notebook, not loose pieces of paper, to record notes, identify notes by date, record all relevant facts as soon as possible, and organize your notes with enough space to add new details during possible follow-up actions. Additionally, to ensure that you take good notes, pace yourself as you write, use abbreviations carefully, ensure accurate spelling, and review your notes. Timing. While capturing information in a timely manner is important, taking notes when an interviewee is speaking may keep you from hearing some of the statements the person makes. A good technique to employ during interviews is to listen closely and pause the conversation to ask for clarification. Then, write down the details. This method will allow you to listen carefully and accurately record information. Use abbreviations. Taking notes quickly can be helpful, especially when you are conducting an interview. Using abbreviations while you write can increase your note-taking speed. However, you should make sure to use common abbreviations and adopt a consistent system for using them. Spelling correctly. Spelling and accurately recording names, inmate identification information, inmate names, cells and bunk numbers, and all other relevant information is a vital part of good note-taking. You should always verify who you are speaking to by checking their identification number and ensuring that the name they give you is accurate. Use the spelling on an inmate's identification card or a person's legal identification card if it is available. Doing so will ensure that you have correctly documented their information. If the person does not have identification, ask them to spell or write out their name. You may occasionally need to ask an interviewee about another person's name. If a person is unsure of the spelling of another person's information, write the word by sounding it out and make a note to find the correct spelling later. Inaccurate information may hinder or delay possible investigations conducted by law enforcement officers or your facility's investigative unit. Review your notes. Reviewing your notes is imperative. Because the accuracy of your report will depend on having good foundational notes, make sure that you have obtained all relevant information from all involved parties. Make sure you have gathered as much information as possible, and be aware that, if you keep notes or a notebook, those notes may be admitted as evidence in court proceedings. Lastly, be familiar with your agency's policies and procedures before disposing of your notes, as your agency may have specific policies for retaining notes. Page 104, Unit 2, Report Writing and Documentation. Lesson 1. Reports. Lesson goal. At the end of this lesson, you will understand the importance of a well-written report, its potential uses, and the types of incidents that require one. Think about this. After an officer witnesses a fight, they prepare an incident report. The officer includes their name, the names of the inmates involved, and the date and time that the fight happened. What other information should the officer include in the report? After you respond to an incident, you will prepare a report, which is a written document that gives information about an incident, situation, person, or event encountered by the correctional officer in a correctional setting. Reports are important because they record what an officer observes and knows. The information in a report could be critical to the well-being of an inmate, officer, or the overall facility. Always keep in mind that reports may be used for legal cases, investigations, and discipline. Note: even after many years, the information contained in a report can be used to prosecute an inmate or subject, shed light on an incident, or protect an officer from liability. Report writing makes up a large share of the daily duties of a correctional officer, and it is essential that officers provide well-written, detailed, and timely reports. People read reports without ever seeing or knowing the officers who wrote them, and readers evaluate not only the officers but also their agencies by the quality of the reports they read. For this reason, officers should write reports that reflect professionalism. The majority of your reports are for internal purposes, but some of your reports may be used for court proceedings, parole hearings, and other processes. It is your responsibility to include all important details in your reports. A poorly written report could result in failure to prosecute a criminal act by an inmate or an officer, create an issue in the correctional facility, or stop an issue from being resolved. Carefully written reports help protect the officer in case of possible complaints or litigation by inmates. Write your report so that it can withstand the test of time because, at some point, it may be referred to years after the incident. The Florida statutes and your agency's policies will dictate how long reports should be retained in record. Reader considerations. Documentation and reports are vital for a well-functioning correctional facility. Once a report is written, submitted, and approved, it becomes a permanent public record. Therefore, you should consider the potential readers and the purpose of each report you write. Readers will have varying life experiences, education levels, cultural backgrounds, and reasons for reading the report. Some examples of potential readers include other officers, supervisors, attorneys, judges, victims, media outlets, and members of the public. Your report could also end up on the desks of legislators, the governor, or journalists. Because every report has the potential to be widely distributed, you must prepare your reports with care and truthfulness. In addition to considering the audience of the report, it is important to consider its tone. A report is a professional document and should be written in an objective manner. You should report only the facts of the event and not your opinions. Reports should be accurate and factual, clear and concise, legible, timely, complete, and written in plain language. Types of reports. Each agency creates its own report forms to document its administrative and operational responsibilities. Some of the commonly used report forms and logs in a correctional facility include the following. Incident report, used in many correctional facilities to detail incidents involving inmates. Corrective consultation, CC form, used to detail counseling and corrective actions taken for minor disciplinary violations. Disciplinary report, DR, used to provide a detailed account of the facts surrounding an inmate's rule violation and sets in motion a series of events that ensure that the inmate receives due process. Use of force report, used any time there is use of force and is attached to an incident or disciplinary report. Count form, used to record inmate counts. Special watch form, used to record activities of inmates under special watch, such as suicide watch, 15-minute watch, direct observation, and juvenile watch. Equipment check form, used to record the location of all equipment at each post. Incident reports also include documentation of any process deficiency, unusual occurrences, discovery of hidden contraband, observation of STG-related documents or graffiti, and other documentation required by your agency. Note that each agency will have different rules and forms for documentation, and you must adhere to your agency's specific policies and procedures. Activities that may need a report or documentation. Some forms and logs may be written on paper, but most facilities use electronic forms for reports and other documentation. Officers should have basic computer skills and apply the agency's policies and procedures regarding the use of computers when writing reports. Before you can determine what forms to use, you will first need to know when something may require documentation or a report. You will need to consider the situation and circumstances in addition to your agency's policies and procedures when making your decision. Keep in mind that all emergencies, incidents, and unusual occurrences will need to be reported. Some activities and incidents that you may need to report or document include identifying inmates, staff, and visitors, searches, person, cell, vehicle, and area, inmate counts, work groups and their locations, inmate movement, all safety and security checks and breaches, all crimes committed and disciplinary actions taken, inmate visitation, including visitation rule violations, inmate counseling or corrective counseling, confiscation and disposal of contraband, inventory of equipment and supplies issued to and received from inmates, inventory of officer equipment, all investigations. Furthermore, at the start of each shift, agencies require correctional officers to start a log, which is a chronological timeline of activities performed during that shift and is specific to a post assignment such as a control room, the visiting park, or a housing unit. Information to include in a report. The information included in a report depends on the type of report you are preparing. In the event of an incident, the officer at the scene prepares the report. Certain incidents, such as use of force, will require additional documentation. You must know the requirements of a report's content, how to store the report, and who to submit the report to for review. Be familiar with and follow your agency's policies and procedures regarding the different types of forms to use for different reports. At minimum, a report must answer the questions of who, what, when, where, why, and how, as well as outline what follow-up actions were taken. Most of this information should be found in your notes. Who? A report must name the people involved in the incident or event, such as the victims, the witnesses, if any, and the suspects. The name of the reporting officer also needs to be documented. Include any titles and identification of people or inmates, as well as who reported the incident, inmate, other staff, or the public. What? A report must detail what happened and provide a chronological order of events. When writing your report, include what activity, rule violations, or crimes, if any, were committed, and what action was taken. You will also need to document what items were lost, damaged, recovered, or stolen, and what weapons or tools were used or recovered. Make sure you have identified what evidence was collected, if any. When? The date and time, or approximate time, of when an incident or event occurred is another important piece of information to include in a report. Make sure that you document the time when you or the responding officer arrived at the scene of the incident. Where? Reports must answer the question of where the incident or event occurred. Make sure to note the exact physical location and where officers and all people involved at the scene were at the time. Why? Detailing why an incident or event happened is equally as important as answering who, what, when, where, and how. Be careful to only include facts, and do not add assumptions and suppositions. Your report should also answer why the people were involved. If there is use of force, you will need to justify why you or another officer made the decision to respond with force. How? Reports should answer how the incident or event started and progressed. Make sure to specify how the incident was reported as well as how it was discovered. Actions taken. Reports should document any and all actions taken by the reporting officer, including follow-up actions. Follow-up action refers to any action you may need to take after interviewing a person or writing a report that pertains to the initial incident, such as reporting any supplemental information that you received after the completion of your report, and all other required activities in accordance with your agency's policies. Examples of actions that you might take during an incident or event could include stopping an argument, restraining an inmate, administering first aid to the sick or injured, and arranging transportation for the sick or injured to the medical unit, a clinic, health center, or hospital. Some examples of follow-up actions that you might take include notifying a supervisor or designated person of the incident, activity, or occurrence, collecting and disposing of evidence, making a housing decision regarding the inmates involved, pending a hearing, and escorting or transporting the inmates involved in the incident. Who, examples, names, titles, identification number, and positions of people involved, identify the victims, witness, and suspects, name of persons, who reported the incident, and the name of reporting officer. What, examples, incidents that occurred in chronological order, activities, rule violations, and criminal actions that led to the incident actions, taken and lost, damaged, stolen, or recovered items. When, examples, Date and time of incident and time of the responding officer's arrival. Where? Examples: location of incident and location of all involved people at the time of the incident. Why? Examples: reason for incident. Include only facts, not assumption or opinion. Reasons why people were involved. Use of force was used, if applicable. How? Examples: the way the incident started, progressed, was discovered, and was reported. Actions taken. Examples: stopping an altercation, restraining an inmate and administering first aid to the sick or injured, arranging transportation to a medical unit, clinic, health center, or hospital, when necessary. Follow-up actions taken. Examples: notifying the supervisor or designated person of the incident, activity, or occurrence. Following the method of evidence collection and disposition. Assigning housing regarding inmates who were involved and are pending a hearing. Escorting or transporting inmates involved. Page 109. Unit 2. Report Writing and Documentation. Lesson 2. Preparing and Writing an Effective Report. Lesson Goal. At the end of this lesson, you will know how to prepare and write accurate and effective reports. Think about this. An officer's report states, "I arrived at the chow hall and had my fellow officers 6. How might this wording reflect on the agency if it were used in court or in the news? Effective report writing reflects a correctional officer's professionalism and protects the officer and the facility from legal liability. It is imperative that your report be detailed and professional. Writing a correctional report is similar to writing an essay because it includes an introduction, body paragraphs, and a conclusion. Preparing to write. Before you start writing your report, ensure that you have obtained all relevant information and recorded it accurately in its entirety. You will do this by reviewing your notes and organizing the information in a way that makes sense for the report. Review notes. Before writing a report, you should review your notes and any statements to verify that you have all of the facts. Reviewing notes before writing will help you write accurate reports, explain why certain decisions were made, and provide necessary details. If you are missing any facts, get them as soon as possible. Organize information. Once you have reviewed all your facts, you can start organizing them. Generally, there are 2 ways to organize information: chronologically and categorically. Arranging information chronologically involves the grouping of recorded information by date and time, usually from the first event to the last. To put it simply, it involves creating a timeline of events. This method is especially useful when writing a narrative report, as readers can easily understand what happened and in what order events occurred. Organizing information categorically involves grouping recorded information into types of collection sources, such as informants, victims, witnesses, suspects, weapons, rule violations, evidence, and the elements of the crime. This method is especially helpful when an officer collects information from multiple and varied sources. Formatting the content of a report. Writing a report requires more than filling in the blanks on a pre-printed form. The largest and most important part of a report is the narrative, a detailed account of an incident and events related to the incident. Normally, narratives are written in complete sentences and describe a sequence of events. The content of the narrative should answer the questions of who, what, when, where, why, and how. An effective report will not only have good content, but also proper formatting. Content refers to the significant facts of an incident or occurrence, while format refers to the way information is organized and presented. Your report must be written in the proper format and include all the important content associated with the incident. Generally, a report is formatted to include 3 parts: the introduction, the body, and the conclusion. Keep in mind that, while a report typically contains 3 parts, you should not limit the report to 1 paragraph per section. The introduction of a report will typically include the date and time of the incident, the location of the incident, and the identities of the people involved. It should also include your response time, name, and initial actions, the case number, and your officer assignment or location. The body of the report is the detailed, typically chronological account of the incident. This section will include the actions you took upon arriving at the scene, such as providing first aid, calling for medical, and interviewing people at the scene. Additionally, include the elements of any rule violations or crimes committed, actions taken to obtain evidence, and any calls for backup, if applicable. Often, the body of the report will contain 1 or more paragraphs, depending on the complexity of the incident and the number of people involved. Lastly, the conclusion will outline the actions taken or how the incident was resolved, how the information and evidence were handled, including the need for further investigation, and any recommendations for disciplinary actio. Writing an effective report. As you are organizing and writing your report information, you will also need to keep in mind the characteristics of an effective report. An effective report is accurate and factual, clear and concise, legible, timely, and complete, and it must comply with your agency's policies and procedures. Accuracy and fact-checking. An effective report must outline facts accurately and in their entirety. In other words, it must include only the facts of the incident represented by answering who, what, when, where, why, and how action was taken. Do not include personal opinions or the opinions of other officers or witnesses. Exclude all judgments, hunches, assumptions, or guesses in a report, and do not alter any information that you have obtained about an incident. If you do, it is considered falsifying the report, which is a criminal offense. You should also avoid irrelevant information, the use of humor and dramatic flourishes, or words with emotional overtones. Make sure the report consists only of facts. To ensure accuracy, include all relevant facts and specific details from your notes, and any statements in the report. Verify that all facts and names are recorded and spelled correctly, and that the numbers written in the report match those in the notes. Ensure that the report contains only what happened based solely on the information, statements, and physical evidence collected. It is important to always state the facts that you have, even if you are missing details or information. It is better to be honest about not having all the details rather than making up or guessing missing information. For example, saying, "I held the inmate down while one of the assisting officers put handcuffs on him," is better than stating, "I held the inmate down while Officer Grimes put handcuffs on him," when you are not sure or cannot remember which officer put the handcuffs on the inmate. By consistently reporting what you observe, including when information is limited, you strengthen the reliability of your reports as a whole. Clarity and conciseness. It is important to use clear and plain language not only when speaking, but also in writing. When you use plain language, you express your thoughts and arguments in a way that any person can easily follow and understand. Using plain and straightforward language in your report will also help to avoid incorrect interpretations or misunderstandings. Be consistent when you identify a person to prevent confusion, and always present events in logical order. Consider the following examples. In the incorrect example, neither Roberts, Williams, or Brophy are identified as inmates or officers, so it would be incredibly easy to misinterpret this information. Incorrect usage. Roberts saw Williams take Brophy's book, and a piece of paper fell out. He told him to hand over the book and the paper from the floor. Correct usage. Officer Roberts saw inmate Williams take inmate Brophy's book, and a piece of paper fell out. Officer Roberts then asked inmate Williams to hand the book and paper over. When you write a report, it must be concise to the point and include only relevant information. Your reports should contain enough detail to make it clear to the reader who took what action while being careful to avoid irrelevant information. In the following incorrect example, notice how the report includes details that are not relevant to the inmate's actions. This results in a report that is wordy and fails to draw the appropriate attention to the incident. Incorrect usage. Officer Williams and Officer Perez were walking down the hall to get a Coke. While on their way to take their morning break, they came around a corner and saw two inmates huddled together and whispering to each other. Both officers thought it looked like the inmates were trying to hide something. They were standing outside the utility closet where lots of contraband can be hidden. When the inmates saw the officers, they stopped talking and looked suspicious, so the officers decided to pat down the inmates to make sure they didn't have anything that they weren't supposed to have. Correct usage. Officer Williams and Officer Perez saw two inmates standing next to the utility closet talking in low tones. The inmates stopped talking as soon as the officers approached. The officers searched the inmates for contraband, but no contraband was found during the search. While it is important to be brief and concise, you must be careful to not leave out important information, because doing so will make the report inaccurate, not detailed enough, or incomplete. Legibility. If you handwrite a report, write clearly and legibly. When you write legibly, your handwriting is easy to read and understand. On the other hand, writing illegibly means your handwriting is unclear and unreadable, which can lead to misunderstanding and misinterpretation of the information. In some cases, writing in all capital letters is a good solution to poor handwriting as long as doing so follows your agency's policies and procedures. Unless your agency specifies otherwise, use a black or dark blue ballpoint pen for clear legibility and the best photocopying quality possible. Writing legibly is essential to writing an effective report. A perfectly written report is useless if no one can read it due to poor handwriting. Timeliness. After an incident, write your reports without delay. Completing a timely report helps you avoid forgetting important details, and it may help you recall important facts that were not recorded in your notes. After you complete a report, turn it in by the end of your shift, unless your agency's policies state otherwise. Your agency may have specific timeframes that apply when completing and submitting various reports. Submitting your reports in a timely manner enables management to deal decisively with issues that may arise from an incident, event, or occurrence. Completeness. Before final submission, make sure that the report is complete by checking that all the important information has been included. As mentioned previously, your report must answer the basic questions of who, what, when, where, why, and how, and it must record any action taken. All the facts, whether favorable or unfavorable to the people involved, must be included as part of the report. Unprofessional writing to avoid. In addition to checking for accuracy, clarity, conciseness, legibility, timeliness, and completeness of a report, you will also need to ensure that the report sounds professional. Always use professional language when writing reports, and be careful to avoid using casual language as it can make your message less effective and reflect poorly on you and your agency. Professional language versus casual language. Professional language refers to the form of language used in professional communication and environments. It emphasizes the standard use of grammar, spelling, and vocabulary, and is commonly associated with formal settings. Casual language, on the other hand, includes slang, colloquialisms, and regional language that does not always follow recognized grammatical rules and spelling conventions. It is used in informal settings and should be avoided in a professional environment. Jargon, slang, and text speak. Unless you are directly quoting someone, your reports should be free of casual or unprofessional language, such as jargon, slang, abbreviations, and text speak. Jargon is specialized language used by a profession or another specialized group. It is often meaningless to people outside of the profession it is used in. It consists of unique terms to the profession and can also include acronyms. Officers may share common expertise and communicate quickly using jargon, but you should not use it in your reports. Meanwhile, slang is informal vocabulary composed of invented words or expressions that are often used by a specific group, region, trade, or profession. While it may be easier to use slang and jargon in your reports, they are not professional in tone. Using slang or jargon will get in the way of clear communication because these words may have different meanings to different people. Someone reading a correctional report should be able to follow the events and understand exactly what happened without having been at the scene or having to interpret the language that is used. The following is an example of the inappropriate use of jargon and slang in a report. Incorrect usage. Yesterday after evening chow, Officer Jones, while assigned as B-dorm supervisor, heard inmate Coker state that he had the 411 on the fish who received a DR for the buck and a shank. He said that he sent out a kite from the box for some rip. Correct usage. Yesterday, after the evening meal, Officer Jones, the B-dorm supervisor, heard inmate Coker state that he had information on the new inmate who received a disciplinary report for homemade alcohol and a weapon. He said that he sent out a note from disciplinary confinement for some tobacco. For a list of common jargon and slang used in correctional facilities, see tables C1 and C2 in Appendix C. Text speak is language used in text messages and digital communications, typically using abbreviations, acronyms, or initials, that does not follow standard grammar, spelling, or punctuation. Some examples include LOL, laughing out loud, IDK, I don't know, JK, just kidding, OFC, of course, and you. Do not use text speak in reports. While text speak may be convenient for taking notes, using it in final reports gives the impression that you are lazy and unprofessional, or that what you are writing is not important. Remember that the reports you prepare will become part of public record, so how you write them matters. Improving vocabulary. Improving your vocabulary is one way you can avoid unprofessional language such as jargon, slang, and text speak. When you encounter unfamiliar words and phrases, take the time to find their meanings and proper usage. At the same time, do not attempt to enhance your reports with language or vocabulary that you are not familiar with, as it may cause the reader to question the accuracy and factuality of the report. When you expand your vocabulary, you increase your report writing skills and become more effective at describing the things that you are required to document. Reading articles about correctional topics can help you expand your professional vocabulary, and similarly, familiarizing yourself with approved agency reports will help you develop good habits and vocabulary when writing reports. Page 115, Unit 2, Report Writing and Documentation Lesson. 3. Grammar and Mechanics. Lesson Goal. At the end of this lesson, you will be able to apply grammar and mechanics correctly when writing reports. Think about this. An officer writes an incident report, and this is the first sentence. I had seen them inmates fighting at approximately round 2 o'clock. There was 5 inmates there. What's wrong with this sentence? How can this sentence be written free of mechanical errors? Content is often seen as the most important element of a report. However, clearly articulating the facts through correct grammar, punctuation, and spelling is as important as the report's content. If the content reflects good information, but contains too many mechanical errors, it can distract from the message and reflect poorly on your competence and professionalism. An effective report should be well written and demonstrate a good command of language. It should be free of errors in sentence structure, grammar, punctuation, and other writing mechanics. Grammar is a set of established rules and guidelines that govern a language's structure and usage. To follow the rules of grammar precisely is to use proper grammar. When rules are applied correctly, the reader is more likely to understand your report. When applied incorrectly, the opposite is true. The reader may misunderstand, misinterpret, or be confused by your report. Parts of speech. It is important to familiarize yourself with the parts of speech so that you can understand how to apply grammatical rules correctly. A part of speech indicates the function of a word in a sentence. The most important ones to know include nouns, verbs, pronouns, adjectives, adverbs, prepositions, and conjunctions. Refer to Table 4.2 for specific examples of how they are used in a sentence. Punctuation marks. Along with the parts of speech, you should be familiar with punctuation marks and how to use them. Punctuation marks are used to separate elements in a sentence. The most common punctuation that you will see in a report include periods, commas, question marks, apostrophes, and quotation marks. Using correct punctuation in your writing is extremely important, as improper punctuation can result in confusing or misleading reports. Grammar rules. English grammar has many different rules, but the primary rules you should know and follow when it comes to report writing are the following. 1. Write in complete sentences. 2. Make your subjects and verbs agree. 3. Use conjunctions to connect ideas. 4. Use commas correctly. 5. Use the correct verb tense. 6. Use end punctuation correctly. 7. Use active voice. 8. Use apostrophes for possessive nouns and contractions. 9. Use quotation marks for direct quotes. Examples of grammar rules. Part of speech. Noun is a person, place, or thing. For instance, Officer Andrew responded to the disturbance in the dormitory. Officer Andrew is a person, disturbance is a thing, and dormitory is a place. Part of speech. Verb. An action or state of being. For instance, the fire started in the laundry room. The word started is the verb, an action in this context. Part of speech. Pronoun. A substitute for a noun. For instance, the inmate said she was not coming out of her cell. In this example, the pronouns are she and her instead of a name. Part of speech. Adjective. Describes a noun or pronoun. For instance, the officer tried talking to the upset inmate. In this example, the adjective is the describing word upset, since it is describing the inmate's state. Part of speech. Adverb. Describes, identifies, or quantifies a verb, adjective, or another adverb. For instance, backup officers quickly arrived to assist with the situation. The adverb is quickly, since it is modifying the word arrived in the sentence, describing how the officers arrived, which was quickly. Part of speech, preposition, shows how something is related to another word or phrase and shows the space, time, or logical relationship of an object to the rest of the sentence. For instance, the fire started in the garbage can near the door. The preposition is in and near. Part of speech, conjunction, a word that joins other words, phrases, clauses, or sentences. For instance, there was an incident at the Sally Port, so the officer wrote a report. The conjunction is the word SO. Write in complete sentences. In order to write a report effectively, you must be able to write in complete sentences. A sentence is a group of words that contains a subject, a verb, and usually an object that expresses a complete thought. Understanding how the parts of speech function in a simple sentence will help you write proper and clear sentences. The subject of a sentence tells you what or who performs an action, while a verb states the subject's action, existence, or state of being. The object identifies the person or thing that is affected by or that receives the action of the verb. Subject, verb, object. John hit Tommy, The subject is John. The verb is hit. And the object is Tommy. When a sentence is missing the subject or verb or does not express a complete thought, it is incomplete and is called a sentence fragment. In the following incorrect example, notice how the sentence has no subject or verb, so it is unclear who did what in the rec yard. When the subject and verb are added, the sentence is complete and expresses a complete thought. Incorrect usage. Fight in the rec yard. Correct usage. I witnessed a fight in the rec yard. Make your subjects and verbs agree. The subject and verb in each sentence must agree in number. A singular subject must have a singular verb, and a plural subject must have a plural verb. When they do not agree, the sentence does not flow well and may be misunderstood. Considering the following incorrect example. The subject they is plural, so a plural verb should be used. The singular verb is would be incorrect because it is singular, while the subject, they, is plural. Incorrect usage, they is brothers. Correct usage, they are brothers. Use conjunctions to connect ideas. A conjunction is a part of speech that is used to connect words, phrases, and sentences together. Commonly used conjunctions include for, and, nor, but, or, yet, and so, also known by the acronym FANBOYS. The following examples illustrate how a conjunction can connect two nouns, Officer Perez and inmate Williams, to make them both the subject of the sentence, as well as how two complete sentences can be joined together using a comma and a conjunction. Nouns. For instance, Officer Perez and inmate Williams were speaking outside the dormitory. The conjunction is the word and, which joins the nouns together. Sentences. For instance, Officer Perez was absent, and the other inmates noticed. The sentences are joined with and, preceded by a comma, which joins the sentences together. Whenever you join two complete sentences using a conjunction, you must place a comma before the conjunction. Notice how in the following incorrect example, there is a conjunction between the two complete sentences, but the comma is missing. This is an error called a run-on sentence and can be corrected by adding a comma. Incorrect usage. Only one officer was observing the dining hall, so the inmates exchanged food. The sentence is wrong because there is no comma before the conjunction, which is the word SO, making it a run-on sentence. Use commas correctly. Commas are one of the more commonly misused punctuation marks. Unlike the period, they are used to signify a pause in speech rather than the end of a thought. A comma by itself cannot be used to join two complete sentences, so it must be paired with a conjunction. When you join two complete sentences using only a comma, as in the following incorrect example, this creates an error known as a comma splice. To fix a comma splice, you can either add a conjunction after the comma, or you can replace the comma with a period to separate the sentences. Incorrect usage. We arrived at the scene. Officer Stone interviewed the inmate. The usage is incorrect because while there is a comma after scene and before the noun, a, officer, there is no conjunction. Correct usage. We arrived at the scene and Officer Stone interviewed the inmate. This usage is correct because of the conjunction after the comma. Correct usage. We arrived at the scene. Officer Stone interviewed the inmate. This usage is correct since instead of a comma and conjunction, the sentence ends with a period after the word scene. Use the correct verb tense. Tense indicates when an action, verb, took place, such as in the past, present, and future. Correctional officers should write reports in the past tense, not in the present tense, because most reports are about events that have already occurred. Incorrect usage, present tense, and then I see the inmate. Correct usage, past tense, and then I saw the inmate. Always check that your verb tenses are correct. You need to be as accurate as possible when describing when and how events occurred, so make sure that verb tense is consistent throughout the report. Use end punctuation correctly. Along with requiring a subject and a verb, a complete sentence must also end with a punctuation mark, such as a period, a question mark, or an exclamation point. Always add the correct punctuation to the end of your sentences and between complete sentences. When two or more complete sentences are improperly joined without punctuation, as in the following incorrect example, this creates an error known as a run-on sentence. Incorrect usage. I arrived at the scene inmate Smith was hitting inmate Copa. In this example, it is a run-on sentence as there is no period after the word scene. Correct usage. I arrived at the scene. Inmate Smith was hitting inmate Copa. In this example, it is correct because the period, after the word scene. Make sure that you use the correct end punctuation for the function of the sentence. If a sentence is a statement, it should end with a period, and if the sentence asks a direct question, it should end with a question mark. For example, what did you see? Since this example is asking, it should end in a question mark. Use active voice. While writing your reports, use an active voice, not a passive voice. In active voice, the subject of the sentence comes before the verb and is clearly stated. In passive voice, the object and the subject are reversed. This often makes a sentence take longer to read and slows down the reader. Consider the following examples. Example of passive voice. The visitor was searched by the officer. Example of active voice. The officer searched the visitor. In the passive example, the visitor is the object of the sentence because they receive the action. However, the reader does not find out who searched them until the end of the sentence, so they have to backtrack in thought. In the active example, it is immediately clear who the subject is, the officer, because the subject is placed at the beginning of the sentence and before the verb. Meanwhile, the visitor receives the action and is therefore the object. Using active voice is not only an effective way to engage the reader, but, more importantly, it ensures that the report is written in a way that people's actions are accountable, including your own. When you write in an active voice, you tell the reader directly who is performing an action and who is receiving an action without any guesswork. You can identify and correct passive voice by asking yourself whether a sentence starts with the subject performing the action. If it does not, rewrite the sentence so that the subject comes before the verb. Use apostrophes for possessive nouns and contractions. An apostrophe is used in one of two ways. It can either show possession or create a contraction. Possession means that a certain object or quality belongs to a person or thing. If a noun is meant to show possession, but the apostrophe is missing, then the sentence is incorrect. You can make a singular noun possessive by adding an apostrophe and the letter S to the end of the word. However, be aware that singular nouns that end with the letter S still require an additional S after the apostrophe to be correct, such as in the correct example. Incorrect usage. The officer searched inmate Jones' cell. It is wrong as it still needs the apostrophe and a secondary S. Correct usage. The officer searched inmate Jones's cell. If a noun is both plural and possessive, the word will not require an additional S after the apostrophe. Remember that the apostrophe indicates possession. If it is missing, the word is plural, and the sentence is incorrect. For example, the inmates were not aware of the officers' schedules. This example pertains to the word officers. where it requires an apostrophe at the end for correct usage. A contraction is when two words are combined to make a single word. However, it is important to note that for the purpose of report writing, contractions should be avoided unless they are part of a statement or direct quote. Incorrect usage. The inmate didn't eat her breakfast. Correct usage. The inmate said, "I don't want my breakfast." Note in the correct example, the inmate statement is in quotations. Use quotation marks for direct quotes. To indicate that you are directly quoting someone, place quotation marks around the person's words. Do not use quotation marks when paraphrasing or summarizing a person's statement, as incorrectly using quotation marks in this way could lead to a misrepresentation of the facts. It is important to only place quotation marks around the words that were actually said by someone. For example, inmate Roberts refused to leave his cell. Is a summary not a quote, therefore incorrect. A direct quote is the following. Inmate Roberts said, "I'm not leaving this cell." Mechanics. In addition to following the rules of grammar, you also need to pay close attention to writing mechanics in your report. Writing mechanics refer to the technical details of writing, such as spelling and capitalization. Misspelled words, poor word choice, and improper capitalization can make your report seem unprofessional, so it is important to get these mechanics right. Spelling and word choice. Before submitting a report, ensure that words are spelled and used correctly. If you are using a computer to write a report, use the spell check feature. However, keep in mind that spell check does not always know whether you have used the correct word for a sentence. In the following incorrect example, the word there is not misspelled, but it is the wrong word for the sentence since the intent is to show possession, and the word being used refers to location. For example, the thief took their money is using the word there, spelled as THERE, which is incorrect usage as it should be there, spelled as THEIR. The thief took their money. There are a number of ways to ensure that your spelling and word choices are correct. Have another person proofread your report to check that you have used the correct words, and if you are unsure of the spelling of a word, consider using a different word that may be simpler. For example, an officer might use the word prison instead of penitentiary, or bruise instead of contusion. Additionally, you may use a dictionary to check your spelling when writing a report by hand. Whichever method you choose, use it consistently throughout the evaluation and proofreading process. You should also be aware of commonly misspelled and mistaken words as well as homophones, which are words that sound the same but have different spellings or meanings. Refer to tables C3 and C4 in Appendix C for examples of commonly mistaken and misspelled words as well as homophones. Capitalization. Some agencies recommend or require the use of all capital letters in reports. When not using all capitals, make sure to capitalize proper nouns. Proper nouns include the names of specific people, places, and things. You must also capitalize the pronoun I as well as the first letter of each sentence. Refer to Table 4-2 for examples of how the rules of capitalization apply in a sentence. Capitalization rule. Names of people, cities, states, and streets. Example: John Smith was sentenced to 10 years imprisonment to be served at the Avon Park Correctional Institution, located at 810 Highway 64 East in Avon Park, FL. John Smith, Avon Park Correctional Institution, Highway 64 East and Avon Park, FL. Are capitalized. Capitalization rule. Names of specific organizations and buildings. Example: the headquarters for the Florida Department of Corrections is located in the Carlton Building in Tallahassee, FL. Florida Department of Corrections, Carlton Building. Are capitalized. Note that Tallahassee, FL is also capitalized in this context. Capitalization rule. Names of days, months, and holidays. Example: Thanksgiving will always fall on the third Thursday of November. Thanksgiving, Thursday, and November are capitalized. Capitalization rule. Geographic locations but not directions. Example: The inmate requested a transfer to a facility in the South in order to be closer to family. Specific region or location. The Sally Port is south of the entrance. Direction. In this example, south is capitalized when it pertains to a geographic location, but south is not capitalized if used in context of directions. Capitalization rule. Titles of professionals only when names are used. Example: I spoke to the captain to explain the situation. Unnamed person. I spoke to Captain Smith to explain the situation. Named person. In this example, Captain Smith is capitalized because the title is followed by a name. Capitalization rule. Brand names. Example: The responding officer administered Narcan to an inmate who was experiencing an opioid overdose. The brand name Narcan is capitalized. Page 122, Unit 2. Report Writing and Documentation. Lesson 4. Reviewing a report before submission. Lesson goal. At the end of this lesson, you will be able to evaluate your reports for factuality, clarity, correctness, and completeness before submitting them. Think about this. An officer misspells an inmate's name in an incident report. What could happen as a result of the inmate's name being misspelled? Evaluating the report. You should always evaluate and proofread a report for errors and mistakes after you finish writing it and before submission. Take your time to read through it and carefully examine it. Make sure that any and all of the relevant facts and statements from your notes are included in the report and that they are accurate, complete, and organized. Editing and proofreading are a vital part of evaluating reports before submission. Editing is the process of writing and revising content for accuracy, organization of ideas, grammar, and overall presentation. Make sure that you edit your report first before moving on to proofreading. Proofreading is the process of reading carefully to spot typos and minor issues with grammar and mechanics that were not caught during editing. When possible, ask another officer to proofread your report for errors. Before submission, your report should be accurate, concise, and easily understood. The following methods will help you catch mistakes that might otherwise be overlooked. Take breaks. Allow some time to pass between writing and evaluating. Doing so will help you return to the report with fresh eyes, which can make finding errors easier. Read the report aloud. Reading a narrative aloud encourages you to read every word, which can help you spot errors. Alternatively, you may listen while another person reads the report to you. Some errors are easier to catch when heard rather than read. Read line by line while using a cover. Place a blank sheet of paper over your report, covering everything but the line you want to read. This method allows you to focus on one line at a time, which can help errors stand out. Know your personal weaknesses. Understanding what you typically struggle with while writing will help you look for those specific errors in your reports. Check for grammatical errors point by point and focus on the following. Spelling. Ensure that all words are spelled correctly. Grammar. Make sure that your verb tense is consistent and that sentences are structured correctly. All sentences should be written using active voice. Punctuation. Check for the correct use and placement of punctuation marks, including commas, apostrophes, and quotation marks. Watch out for paired punctuation. In other words, remember to use both sides of punctuation that come in pairs, for example, quotation marks or parentheses. Capitalization. Verify that the appropriate words are capitalized. Vocabulary. Select the appropriate words and use them correctly. Avoid slang, jargon, and text speak. Typographical errors or typos. Assess for keystroke errors, especially for words that the spell check feature might miss. Finalizing the report. After you complete and proofread the report, you must submit it to a supervisor for review and approval. Before you submit your report, verify that the report is complete and finalized by taking the following actions. Ensure that all the details, including who, what, when, where, why, how, and actions taken, are fully answered. Include rule violations, if any. Ask yourself, if I was not involved or did not witness this incident or event, would I have a clear picture of what happened after reading this report? If the answer is no, revise your report and fill in any missing details. Verify that you have identified and corrected all errors. Sign, date, and distribute the report according to your agency's policies and procedures. Attach all relevant documents, pictures, logs, chain of custody for evidence, medical documents, evidence submissions, and follow-up actions. Over time, the more you practice writing and evaluating reports, the more professional your reports will become.